Welcome back to the Morning Brief on Channels Television. And we're starting off with that very sensitive subject following that video that went viral on X a few days ago showing, that rather violent situation. And, it causes us to reflect yet again about bullying, the nature of bullies. It is said that they're unperturbed about anxiety, they're not pro-social. So how do we not raise bullies? And, we say in these parts that it takes a village to raise a child. So when children begin to display such antisocial behavior, it causes us to ask if the village is performing its collective responsibility of raising a child responsibly. So joining us to have that conversation, we have Mrs. Leila Fowler Amber. She's a member, Board of Governors, Association of Private Educators in Nigeria, APEN. You're welcome to the program, ma'am.
Thank you.
We'll also have joining us Mabel Okiriafo. She's a developmental psychologist. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
I'm going to start from what seems appropriate. I went to a boarding school myself and I was bullied. I recall I was also bullied in primary school, and the situations are different. In primary school, I went to a private primary school. In secondary school, I went to a public secondary school. One would think that, bullying abounds in public schools, but we're now seeing it more in private schools, considering the events of the last few years. So what's the scale of, this event in private schools? And why are private schools not seemingly now, with caution, not a safe haven for children as we expect them to be?
Once again, good morning, and my thoughts are especially with the family in Abuja. And I want to say that bullying requires a comprehensive approach. And I think it's unfair to say that it happens mainly in private schools. The ecosystem has very, very similar systems that they have to follow. So you have to judge by an individual school. There's certain guidelines that have to be put in place by a school. Most importantly is every school must have a common ethos when it comes to safeguarding. So it's important to say that schools should be judged individually. If schools follow policies they're supposed to follow, we won't see this. And every institution, educational institution, globally or in Nigeria, whether public or private, must have a safeguarding policy, must have anti-bullying policy. I think it's coming to the limelight because maybe you've had incidences where you have seen private schools have been highlighted. But I can speak especially for our organization, APEN. For you to join the organization, you have to have certain policies in place. We visit schools to make sure those policies are in place. So I think that when we're talking about bullying, what we should be looking at is that it's a community approach. They shouldn't be blamed because, first of all, values begin from the home. Parents are primary parents. The school are secondary parents. And it's very unfortunate because we have a third parent that's taking over the first and the second parent. What we are seeing in the system is there's a lot of neglect. Neglect meaning there's emotional neglect, there's detachment from parents. Parents have to be part of the journey. I'll give you an example. I run a girls' school, but I have 3 boys, the oldest being 32. I was very present when they were going to school. I needed to ask questions. I need to make sure my child was in a safe environment. So I think, first of all, we should take away the bias that this happens just in private schools. We don't have statistics in Nigeria, but if you look at statistics globally, and you have to understand the alphas and the Generation Z have the same traits as any other teenager globally. We're seeing that 20% of students globally are being bullied. So it's a global issue. It's not a private school issue or public school issue. It's an issue where the whole community, you spoke about community parenting, is an issue now where we have to understand that parent modeling is key to the development of the child. We have to understand that parents have to take responsibility. educators have to take responsibility, students have to take responsibility, because there's a triangular relationship. And once there's a gap, a parent is not involved, a student is not involved, the school is not involved, you're going to see more of bullying. But most importantly, what we should be working on is to make sure that the education ecosystem follows all guidelines concerning bullying policies, concerning policies that keep the children safe.
Well, pardon me. What I meant was that, you would have thought that private schools would be more of a safe haven than public schools. I didn't
Whether
say that
yes,
there was,
okay, yes.
bullying was
Whether
more prevalent
private
in private
or
schools.
public, the ecosystem should follow the same policies. We're seeing a lot of policies. I mean, I live in Lagos State, and we're seeing that the governor in Lagos State, because I've worked I've volunteered in the system on some committees, and we're seeing that the ecosystem, once you follow a policy, whether you're in public or in private, I think we shouldn't have a division to say that it's safe to be in every system. You're all part of the ecosystem, because at the end of the day, whether you go to a public school or you go to a private school, we're all going to meet in the marketplace. So it's imperative that we follow policies, and it's imperative that the government is very strict about policies as well to ensure that these are being enforced.
You talked about guidelines and that all schools should follow, and I believe that speaks to what is called a code of conduct. I think when I went to school, it was called a prospectus that informed you about how we should behave in a particular school, and it should be obtainable in all schools.
Absolutely.
But it appears as if, from what we are seeing, evidence that is emerging, that not all schools are observing it to the letter. So, for instance, in the school where this has happened now, just a few days ago, one of the responses, according to the report, is that the school said what happened was an incident between minors, and that evidently is not just an incident between minors. So, is it complacency on the part of the school, or is it factors around the school happenings, that inform such lackadaisical disposition towards such an incident within the school? Give us an insight.
Definitely, I don't know the facts, just what I've seen on TV. But if the facts present as there is, then there's definitely something lacking. All parties, the students, the parents, the educators, must understand the anti-bullying policy. And all anti-bullying policies are very similar. It's really enforcing that there has to be empathy, there has to be safety, there has to be respect. You have to make sure that you're not bullying any individual, because bullying comes in different forms. So what I am seeing is that these policies are not being enforced. It's not a one-off. It is a constant. You have to also understand that even bullying policies have to be reviewed. The bullying policy you used last year is not going to be the same bullying policy you use the next year. So what we're seeing is a bit of carelessness in some spaces. It is important that there are clear guidelines as to consequences. There's no way you can water down a consequence like that and say it's just between minors. There has to be clear consequences,
right,
so that children and the entire ecosystem understand that it's not tolerated.
Okay, let me come to the developmental psychologist. Let's leave the systemic. Let's get to the individual.
Okay.
And I'm going to pose it like Bukola did with an experience. I went to a community secondary school in my JS1. The first day, I was bullied. I cried. The second day. The third day, until I had to, Nigerian parlance or global parlance, man up and be ready for anything. Now, this is what it did to me. I went to the secondary school, like a young chap. You want to get the best of grades, come the first 3 in the class. But because of how I was bullied, I made up my mind that I just want to successfully leave JS1 to JS2. I don't care whether I came last, because I had a big plan. And my plan was against the brothers and sisters of everybody who bullied me. Fortunately for them and me, by JS2, I left the school. So my question is, what it goes through the mindset of the people will always come out to look for people to bully. I want you to walk us through their mindset, because if we can diagnose that, we can help in some way or form.
Okay, thank you very much, and good morning. Good morning again. I think fundamentally, in the mind of the child that is engaging in bullying, I'm just listening to your story, and what's coming to my mind is social learning. Right, you went through a process, and from that process, you had a goal in mind. You're going to do the same thing you have learned because someone had showed you, right? So someone had modeled a particular sort of behavior to you, and from there, you also want to perpetrate the act, right? So social learning is key when we talk about the incidents of children engaging in bullying behavior. And what goes through the mind of a child? I like to tell people this and keep it as clear as possible. A child is always a child. Children come into the world with fresh ideas, ready to learn. So the child at first is a peace-loving individual until someone begins to show them that there could be an imbalance somewhere, and you can take advantage of that imbalance. Because the child that is going to engage in bullying behavior would not necessarily do so if they feel they're at the disadvantage. But when they begin to perceive that I have an edge over this person, and I can use that edge to my advantage, and the environment also creates a reinforcing factor for that child that sort of strengthens that perception for the child, then the child would continue. So for some children, there's been a history of things from the past. Like she said, something that is very fundamental. Where's the child coming from? What has been the relationship of that child with their parents at home? The people within the environment, the home environment. Has this child also been exposed to violence? In the mind of this child, is bullying the other person the equation, the balancing factor when there's an imbalance in the system, when there's a problem, when there's an issue to be resolved? If I feel insecure, do I have to be overbearing to make my points, to get my point across to you? Do I have to wield my physical strengths, my other abilities, my clique? Because when you talk about bullying, it's not just physical now. Sometimes people use their social capital, right? We have a clique of people, we have a clique of friends that we are the popular ones. So if I feel insecure in myself and I want to gain balance, I want to gain strength, I want to have the euphoria of power, I'm going to use my social capital, I'm going to use my strength, I'm going to use my words, I'm going to use my fist at you. So in the mind of that child, the child is trying to find a place of security where they are in control. The bullying child wants to be in control. They want to find a standing where they can also assert themselves. And I always tell people, the person that is engaging in bullying also has a need for help. Because oftentimes we look at a bullying situation and everybody wants to hit and let the hammer fall on the person that's engaged in the bullying. But look back at the history of this child. This child was not born a bully. This child was socially engineered to take up the persona of a bullying person and then begins to perpetrate bullying. So for the child that engages in bullying behavior, it's a thing of being in control. It's a thing of finding a way to express their assertiveness. It's a thing of finding, creating that power shift for themselves where they are no longer insecure. So they find strength, they find power when they are able to exercise themselves through such acts of bullying. So pretty much.
For the record, I didn't bully anyone anyway.
Because you left the school.
I left the school, perhaps.
You probably would have.
So naturally, everybody was looking at me. Did you bully anyone? I didn't bully anyone, but I was bullied naturally.
Yeah.
And I was slapped in school. I couldn't see I think it was my left eye for a few days. I'd carry plaster on my face. Well, it got me the attention of the ladies anyway, so it was a good one. But that aside, I see a common thread in what you're saying, and I think it's the elephant in the room, which I want us to just address frontally. Parenting, right? There are different moving parts, I should say. We're trying to handle school management, anti-bullying policy, the psychology of the bully, and the rest. But parenting, I don't know if we were to give it a percentage, it would definitely be more than other moving parts in this. So let's speak frontally to parenting. And I know parents are watching, and I don't want to even indict any parent, but these are things we need to talk about. How are we missing it when it comes to parenting? And I think both of you can speak on this. How are we missing it when it comes to parenting children such that they don't become bullies?
Okay.
It's a tough one, so anybody
All
can
right,
just speak.
so, okay then. So I think when it comes to parenting, if I would do the percentage stuff, and it's not to blame anyone, it's just for us, when things like this happen, they are learning opportunities. Where did I get it wrong? What do I need to do differently with my child? What should I start doing? So I would say 60, 20, 20. 60 to parenting, because like you said, the parents are the first call. Your child is going to be with you in the early formative years. What are you doing in that period? So we have what you call, so parents are very familiar when you talk about developmental milestones. Okay, so you talk about seeing all of those physical things that you would see, but there's also something called psychosocial development, where children learn to grow into their sense of identity. So the parenting process is supposed to be available to help that child to have that solidification of the persona, their self-identity. Because a lot of times the person that is being bullied, sometimes if you look deep down, because I looked at that video severally. At first, I said, oh, this should be a senior and a junior. And then I was shocked. They said they were both classmates. And for the life of me, I just couldn't come to terms with whatever has happened to this child that has made her susceptible to take such hitting from a friend. What is the education that they've told her, they've given her at home? Was it a situation of if someone slaps your right cheek, turn to the left cheek? Right. So what is the education we give our children at home? What is the support system? Right. So right from infancy, children need to have they need to have that idea that they are in a safe and loving environment. They're secure. Right. In terms of safeguarding, they need to have trust in the people around them. And when it comes to trying out things, taking initiative, having that sense of autonomy, parents play a huge role in sort of speaking to their children, having them gain that sense of self and trying to connect. A lot of times we want to connect with our children when they're all grown, but you connect with your children when they're very young. So I know there's a lot of things going on with double income families where mother and father have to be out of the home. But we say also that it's not in terms of the quantity of time you have to spend with your child, it's the quality. Do you take time to find out what is going on in the lives of your children? For instance, if your child is having a situation in school, are you a safe place for them to come and discuss that? Are you available? Because these things don't just happen overnight. There are incidents, there are situations that have come up, even right in the home, nannies, aunts, uncles. This child has first been bullied at home. So the self-esteem has already been depreciated even from home, and then getting to school, and they discovered over time there's a sense of learned helplessness for this child. I can't do anything about this. I don't have anyone to talk to about it. And even when they talk to you about it, do you take action as a parent? Right.
I don't know if you want to comment on this.
Yes, I'll be happy to comment. I think I'm going to be a little harder being in the school system. There's a lot of neglect with parenting, and parenting starts from the foundation. And a lot of parents are in denial. Parents have to understand that children have various faces and they play various roles depending on where they are. We're seeing a lot of neglect. We're seeing a lack of involvement. We're seeing a lot of denial. So it's important that parents understand that they have to be active parents. You cannot supplement being active with material things. As parents, you have to build memories. You have to understand that it's a journey. It's a journey whereby you also have to understand that you're the psychologists, have identified that the emotional part of a brain does not even fuse till a child is 26. So children need guidance. You cannot leave them alone. And parents have to be extremely present to understand that they're the ones determining the journey of the child, not the school. So they have to determine. I mean, when my boys were in school, I said to the school, I don't believe in changing schools. We're going to get this right. But I had to be active. I had to make sure that at the end, what was my objective? I think a lot of parents are not looking at what the goal, the objectives are, understanding that there's no perfect child. There will be loopholes around, but you have to stand as that person that guides the child. And you also have to understand that there's a very holistic approach to parenting, which means you can't do it alone. it's an entire community. And what we're seeing a breakdown in family. I mean, things happen. Sometimes there'll be single families, nothing wrong with that. But we also understand that we have to, in that case, make sure that the communities that can help in ensuring that at the end of the day, this individual contributes positive to society. So I think parents have to have a look at how we're parenting. And most importantly, I must add, we're Nigerians, we're Africans. Our culture helps in setting boundaries. I think a lot of us have become so westernized, and in the process of being westernized comes with westernized problems that our societies cannot handle. We don't have the manpower to deal with drug rehab. Sure. We don't have the manpower to deal with other things that are going on in society. So it's important that we understand, we embrace our culture, because it promotes respect, it promotes empathy. And in the process, what we're seeing is that because of the lack of parenting, we're seeing children that have adapted the spirit of apathy. They don't show emotions. They've become very hard. And that does not represent who we are as a people.
So we have a lot of work to do in that regard.
Absolutely.
Not just parents, everyone that happens to be around a child. You've spoken to that. I want us to speak to the psychology of the bullied now. I'll try and touch on my experience a little bit. In primary school, it was a private school, and so it was just, around my peers. So I responded. I can't remember the entire situation because I was rather young. But after I fought back, I was never bullied again. But it was a different scenario in secondary school, because those who bullied me in secondary school were principalities who were much older than me. So I had to endure it until I couldn't endure it anymore. That's a long story. So how should the bullied respond? And I have Namtira's image in my head now. She just sat and took it. Yeah. And the reason this question is important is because as parents, we're not always going to be where our children are. A lot of times we have to turn our backs and just pray that the hand of God is upon them. So how should the bullied respond?
So I think first thing, let's take a cue.
And that's for both of you.
Let's take a cue from what you said. What happened in the primary school? When you resisted, it stopped. That's one level. Even though that shouldn't be the first option available to you. The first thing would be to report it. Right, children should know that they can report it. And the idea of us saying the victim of bullying sort of disempowers, right? So you want the child to understand that in this situation, you're being bullied and it's not acceptable. So for the child that is being bullied, that is enduring a bullying situation, first and foremost, you must be able to report it. I always tell young people, I also have children, when they were very young to they had situations, as little as subtle things as friends speaking on nice things to them, and they come back to them and I say, no, you need to go back. When your friend says this, you have to be able to respond this way. So you have to have a sense of identity of who you are, and be able to refuse to be bullied, right? Not necessarily going physical. And the first thing, understanding that you are a person that is worth respecting. You are a person that that has a right to be in the same space as a person that is trying to bully you. And you must know what the procedures are in your school. When you report to a person in your school, the teacher, your class teacher, nothing is done. Go walk up to the next person. The next responsible adult in the school environment, report. If nothing happens, report to your parents at home. And another thing I've discovered, because when the Sylvester issue happened, I was in the midst of some teenagers and we're just talking about it. And you will discover that for children, there's this cultish perception that when you report what is wrong, then you're a snitch. Even though what you're reporting is inimical, is wrong. And it's time we begin to reorientate our children to understand that a snitch is not a label for reporting what is wrong.
Right.
You need to turn that around, because then you also have, apart from the person that is being bullied, you have people standing by to observe the incidents occurring, and nobody is going to report. And what we are all communicating, what that environment is communicating to that child that is being bullied is, you can't do anything about it. You have to let it go. That is wrong. You have to understand that you can report it. You can disempower the bully by reporting it. And then you have to be able to assert yourself, right? I saw that in Namtira. I don't know what switched in her. When the girl hit her, I think it was in the cafeteria. When she hit her the first time, she tried to block it off. And then all of a sudden, she just goes into a shell and she's no longer responding. So I'm thinking, what could possibly have happened if she resisted and walked away from that place? We probably would not have had a recurrence, very likely. So you want to be able to stand your ground and say, no, you can't do this to me. And if you continue, I'm going to report this. If I report it to this person, there's no action. I'm going to escalate to the next person, and I'm going to report to my parents. And so parents also must know that when your child reports something to you, do not leave it. Go to the school and discuss that thing with the school authority and resolve it. Because a lot of times I heard from 1-2 children that, oh, if I report it to my mom, my dad, nothing happens. So that is a further disempowering of the child that is being bullied.
All right.
Yeah.
Jeffrey.
Ma'am.
I totally agree with you, but I have an approach meaning that if the culture of the school does not entertain reporting, then the victim will always be bullied. So it's interesting you say the children should report it, but what is the culture of the school? Does it empower people to report such things as bullying? So my approach is that it's a learning approach. When things like this happen, all of us in the ecosystem should revisit our policies. We should empower our children to be in an environment where they're able to report. We say that Nasira was calm, but none of us know what was going on in the background. Not even in her mind. We don't know what the external environment looked like. We don't know if there was somebody pointing something. So it's important that we cannot help somebody being bullied until the structures are put in place to ensure that whoever is being bullied is empowered. And that goes through a lot of education. Parents must be educated on the policies. The children must be educated. The educators must be educated. Even the presence of educators. I didn't see a lot of teachers around. People must be in the environment. We must stress that the safety of the children is the ethos of every school. And that means that children must be guided, children must be supervised at all times.
We're totally out of time, but just to chip this in, any of you could answer. There's an element we seem to miss, the audacity of that incident. The audacity here means somebody's filming.
Yes.
Recording. These are young children filming bullying. That is dangerous. So, straight question, when it comes to these kind of incidents, what should be the appropriate punitive measure? Expulsion? What exactly? In 30 seconds.
Well, being in a school system, I can only speak for my school. The child will be expelled because, first of all, the child has killed the esteem and gone against every policy that needs to be done. And most importantly, you talked about the phone. Schools should not have children having phones in schools. In a particular school in the UK now, the headmaster has decided that children stay till 7 p.m. and do extracurricular activities because he has seen the impact of children using phones. So if it was in my own environment, the child will be expelled. However, I must add, did the school, you can't just expel a child if you have not provided guidelines, you don't have policies in place that identify that a child will be expelled if they are part of such activity.
Okay.
Yes.
Just a quick one. We're totally out of time.
Yeah, so I may not toe the line of expulsion because these are children that are growing, but there must be that policy, that guidelines, that the children must be part of the signing in process. They must acknowledge, they must sign that bullying policy to say, okay, if I do this, these are the consequences. Meaning there's a pre-communication, and then you could have a graduated sequence of consequences depending on the severity of the instance. But more importantly, we want to also be mindful of what is going on with the child. So even if we're going to give punishments and consequences, we must also look at rehabilitating the mind of that child so that they don't keep on perpetrating the bullying acts.
Well, sounds like a situation between the rock and the hard place, particularly because if that video didn't get out, maybe, that bullying could have continued in that school. And that speaks to all other schools where bullying is taking place. Administrators there must reflect and look at their structures, as you have said. Well, I want to thank you very much, guests, for coming on the program today. Mrs. Leila Fowler Amba, Member, Board of Governors, Association of Private Educators of Nigeria. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your time and your contribution. Also want to thank you very much, Ms. Mabel Okiria, for developmental psychologist. We have profited from your sound counsel.
Thank you
so
for
much
having me. Thank you
for your time on the program.
Thank you.